Even after almost 40 years, Bases Loaded on the NES is still a fantastic game. When I play this game, I still feel the same way that I felt back when I was a kid. And I get just as frustrated with the game today as I did back then. You know, it was probably sometime around 1995 or 96 that I got my copy of Bases Loaded. I'm pretty sure that I got it on sale for cheap, probably used. This was right after the NES had been discontinued and people were offloading their game collections left and right for whatever money they could get for it. That's back before people seriously collected games, and I spent hours playing this game. It looks like a simple game, but looks can be deceiving. Pitching can be kinda tricky, and hitting really isn't quite as easy as it looks. In particular, the center field camera angle makes things a little bit harder than they probably should be. But it's not impossible. Actually, the more that you play this game, the more that you'll get used to its internal logic, and that's when you get sucked in. First of all, the center field camera angle is actually well done because the action always focuses on home plate. So if you've got a left-handed pitcher, he will always be on the bottom right side of the screen, and a right-handed pitcher will always be on the bottom left of the screen. Now, there are two parts to pitching as the manual tells you. First, you choose your speed. Up is a fastball, which is backwards for most Nintendo games. Down is a changeup, and pushing nothing means a medium pitch. You then choose the location you want your pitch to go. Now, it's a little bit more tricky than that because you can move the catcher's mitt along as the pitch is in the air. I've had a lot of success with low pitches that curve in from the outside. If you can keep the ball low and inside, it's really hard for the batter to crush it. If you keep it high though, stuff like this can happen. Batting follows the same logic more or less. When you swing, you push the directional arrows and then the A button. The direction has your batter swing at the spot that you've chosen. It takes a little bit of practice to get used to this. However, after a little while, you'll get used to the pace and will know how to make contact. And after a little while, you'll get used to what is a ball and what is a strike. Now, fielding is a completely different story, and the fielding in this game really is an adventure, let me tell you. The computer is really bad at fielding, so don't feel bad if you make mistakes. However, close plays almost always are called in favor of the defense. Usually the computer will automatically put the fielder in the right place, though unfortunately you can't dive for balls or run any faster to prevent something like this from happening. And sometimes balls that look clearly foul are called fair, like this one. The automatic fielding system has my right fielder running the wrong way. But fortunately, the computer is too stupid to turn this into a triple. Just like RBI baseball, Bases Loaded can be really frustrating because your infielders automatically move the wrong way, leaving a huge defensive gap. And any ball hit to the outfield gap is going to be a lot of trouble. Now, this particular play is odd because the computer decided to run out of the way of the throw to third base, something that I don't think I've seen before in this game. I guess everybody makes mistakes. Unfortunately, when you're playing defense, both A and B throw the ball, which is a problem if you want to run to the base, not throw to it. But the nice thing is that the defensive problems impact both teams equally. The computer is just as frustrated as you are. And of course, this game is obviously the best if you've got two players, but there are a few other interesting aspects of this game that we should really dig into. The camera angles, for example, make the most sense if you watch Japanese baseball from the late 1980s. For example, check out these clips from the 1987 Japan series, played only 4 months after the game was first released in Japan. Naturally, Bases Loaded is not a perfect simulation of the television broadcast, but it honestly comes surprisingly close. That's impressive for a game from 1987. Now, Bases Loaded isn't the first game that tried to do this, but it's clearly better than the games that came before it that tried to turn it into a television experience. Check out World Series Major League Baseball for the Intellivision, for example. The angles are ambitious, sure, but this game looks and plays just horribly. Hardball is probably a better comparison, and to give Hardball an advantage, I'm playing the Sega Genesis version, which came out in 1991, but the camera angle is just awful. It is possible to hit the ball, sure, but it's really awkward. Bases Loaded has a much more natural feel to it, and the camera angle is a lot easier to deal with, at least in my opinion. Now, the fascinating part about Bases Loaded is not just the US version, which came out in 1988. Now, it's the Japanese version, which was only the third baseball game released for the Famicom. It was a huge step, a huge improvement above everything else that had come out before it. It all started off with the 1983 game Baseball. That's the old black box classic. Though it looks primitive, this game is actually a lot better than you think and was a clear improvement over every other home console and computer baseball game in 1983. It's also really satisfying to hit a home run, even though it does take a little bit of time to wait for the players to finish rounding the bases. The computer is also really bad at fielding, but that's something you're going to have to get used to when you play these old NES games. Anyway, the second game was Famista, which we know as RBI Baseball here in the United States. It's certainly not flawless, but it's a lot of fun, and it plays pretty quickly as well. The computer makes ridiculous mistakes when it's fielding, though, which means the game winds up being just a little bit too easy. But things like different pitching angles and styles make RBI Baseball a timeless classic. And of course, it's always fun to see Jose Canseco hit the ball into the stratosphere like this. And well, that was all the competition that Bases Loaded had when it came out on the Famicom in Japan. It had been 6 months since Famista had come out. Now, everybody knew that there was a big market for good baseball games. Famista had been a huge success. We're talking millions of copies sold. But the game that they released here was really ambitious, even more than you realize. Moero Pro Yakyu was the name, which means Burning Pro Baseball, and the game included a voice synthesis module that sounds amazing even to this day. The crack of the bat, the roar of the crowd, the players screaming out, everything is perfect in the Japanese version. And it's a lot more satisfying to hit a home run with those high quality sounds. Now, the voice synthesis module was actually the major selling point for this game in Japan. It's all over the place when you look at the old magazine articles. Advertisements for the game made a big deal of the sounds that were included. That's what all these speech bubbles over here are saying: strike, crack, home run, and so on. Biweekly Famitsu's in-depth review was covered with references to the voice module, and as you can guess, the reviewers were chiefly impressed with the television-style presentation and the absolutely amazing sound effects. I agree, by the way. In fact, I think the Japanese version is clearly better because of the voice synthesis module. But of course, most of you are likely not going to hear it. The reason why is because most emulators are not really capable of playing it, and the reason behind that is actually kind of interesting. I played through the Japanese version of the game without the voice synthesis, and I was pretty unimpressed. Without the sounds of the umpire, it's just another baseball game, nothing really special there. So it turns out that Moero Pro Yakyu included this special synthesizer chip, the NEC-D7756C. Anyway, according to this old blog post I found, there's no easy way to dump that chip into a ROM format to accompany the rest of the game. If you want to hear it the right way, you need to use the emulator Nestopia, and you need to figure out where to download the sound files and how to install them. Now, there are quite a few other sports games on the NES that use this audio chip, almost all of which are in this Moero series. And of course, if you really are a Famicom geek, you already know that the Famicom Disk System used a similar audio chip expansion port concept to improve the audio quality on a number of its games. Now, in most cases, I would tell you that the NES version is just fine. I mean, it does have the voices, right? But the NES has that metal bat sound, and the voices aren't really quite as sharp and crisp. The problem is that the NES games couldn't use the same expansion audio option for technical reasons that I honestly don't fully understand. Anyway, we wound up with an inferior product. But as impressive as the audio is in this game, it's not everything. The early Japanese versions were filled with bugs, like pitches that were clearly balls being called strikes. Some of these fielding quirks remain in the NES version. And of course, there are times where the fielding just drives you absolutely nuts. Thankfully, though, the AI in the early versions of this game doesn't know how to run the bases. But then again, sometimes you can take advantage of the awful fielding and sneak in an extra run here or there. The play here is second base, but the computer can't judge whether it has a realistic chance of throwing you out of the plate or not. Also, in the early Japanese versions, it's really common to see fly balls trapped instead of caught, even if you let the automatic fielding do its thing. I still managed to make some pretty ridiculous errors on my own. Again, this is because pushing B and the base makes you throw the ball, not run to the base. You can also increase your error total if you start screwing around and doing things like this. Even though nobody is on base, this actually counts as an error. The same thing happens in the US version. And if you want, you can throw the ball to yourself like this over and over again. It's kind of fun. But enough rambling, how does the game match up? Biweekly Famitsu gave this game absolutely superb ratings when it came out. It was actually pretty rare for a game to get an 8 rating from each of the reviewers like this. They were a pretty tough crowd to impress back in those days. It's a little bit harder to find US reviews. Nintendo Fun Club, for example, only published this advertisement. The game was featured in issue 1 of Nintendo Power, but only really as another advertisement. Nintendo Power didn't give ratings in that issue. It was literally nothing more than advertisements for the latest games. The first US issue of Video Games and Computer Entertainment called it a realistic game in its Christmas 1988 buyer's guide, but didn't offer much more information. And while I was able to find newspaper articles that mentioned the game, I didn't find anything that even came close to a review. I'm guessing that the adults didn't take these games seriously back then. Now, the author of this 1989 book on Nintendo strategies said that this was their favorite baseball game to play, much more than RBI Baseball. But for a book on strategies, there really wasn't much actual strategic guidance. Now, the best known review is this one from Computer Gaming World, the December 1988 issue. The reviewer here says that Hardball was better, but I just showed you that that's not true. There's a claim here that it's too hard to hit the ball, which is also not true. Whoever wrote this didn't really play the game. The reviewer also claims that the game takes about 75 minutes to play, which is not true. Now, it does take a while to play, about 40 minutes for a full game for me. That's because there are all of these cutscenes and shots of the scoreboard that do nothing but waste time. The Japanese version is actually even slower since it also shows the batter walking up to the plate. Well, obviously the idea here was to match what a real-life broadcast of baseball was like in Japan, and it does a fine job of that, sure, but there's no reason to say that the game takes 75 minutes to play. I just don't believe that. That's hyperbole from a computer game reviewer who wanted their favorite game to look a little bit better. I came across this guy online who played until he won 80 games and got the congratulations screen. It took him 50 hours. As you can see, he didn't exactly love the game, and I disagree with him on that point. He notes that it took him about a half hour per game, and that's after he devised a strategy to allow him to win every game he played. And of course, he learned about a couple of tricks, including the mythical super pitch, which I still haven't been able to figure out. Now, there are some tricks that the guy probably didn't know about. Every team has a player who is capable of bunting for a home run. Now, bunting in this game is really buggy, so it's hard to get this to work. But when you do, it's awesome. Imagine pulling this one out in two-player mode, hitting a home run off a bunt. Anyway, I wonder if the Computer Gaming World reviewer would have written something a little different about the differences between players if they had known that some players could hit a home run on a bunt. Now, I'm probably not going to try to win 80 games in a row in order to beat this game. That would be a pretty crazy task, and there are other games I'd also like to play. But I also disagree with that blogger. I think that this game is actually much better than he gives it credit. Even with its frustrations, the US version of Bases Loaded really is a solid game. It's a lot harder than most of the NES baseball games, and it feels really rewarding when you finally figure it out and start winning. Even with the fielding issues, you'll still love this game if you're an actual baseball fan, and I've got a lot of great memories playing it. With the extra sound chip, I think the Japanese version is actually one of the best baseball games on the Famicom. It just feels so exciting to hear the crowd roar, even if it's a routine fly ball. While I probably couldn't play this game 80 times in a row just to say I beat it, I'm absolutely going to play it again. It's a lot better than what the critics say. And you know what? This game is probably a lot more fun if you don't spend all your time looking for glitches and cheats. Anyway, that's the way that I feel about it. Is it better than Famistov? Well, that's debatable, but I really do like the extra sound chip. It's probably not the best baseball game on the Famicom, but I think that it's absolutely one of the best. Is it better than its sequels? Well, we'll have to play those one by one and see.